Good morning. Welcome to my living room for another thought for the day. Nice to see you. I hope when you see my face you smile at me, because when I'm recording this all I see is my own face looking back at me. But I imagine your faces every day when I'm talking to you, and I hope my thoughts encourage you and help you. We're back in Luke today, Luke chapter 20, verses 19 to 26. And this is an incident here where the chief priests and scribes were getting really very angry with Jesus. They were afraid of the people because the people enjoyed the ministry of Jesus. They were captivated by him and they followed him around. And they were afraid that if they did something against Jesus, the crowd would react and they would be in trouble. So what they tried to do was and they'd recognized that many of the parables that he told were told against them. The parables against religious leaders that misled people, the parables that talked about a long period of time when God had tried to bring his people back. They understood these parables. They knew what he was talking about. He was talking about how they'd not received him, just like their forefathers had not received the words of the great prophets that we have recorded in the Bible. They hadn't responded to those things. They hadn't listened. They hadn't accepted what God had to say about them. Indeed, many of the prophets have been treated very badly by the people. And Jesus said that they were of the same kind and they were going to do the same thing. People who are in power do not like their power to be threatened, and here was Jesus threatening them. And so what they contrived to do was to send people to Jesus to ask him awkward questions in the hope that he would say something that would really upset the people. And the touchiest subject for the Jewish nation at the time was their relationship with Rome. The Roman Empire ruled a large part of the Mediterranean area, and it was a very peaceful rule, but it was hated as occupational rule is hated by the people who are being ruled over by another country. And so the Jews hated the Romans. And so to ask Jesus a question about whether taxes should be paid to Caesar or not was touching a very sore subject. And this is what they asked. They couched it in very nice words. They said, "Teacher," verse 21, "we know that you speak and teach rightly and show no partiality, but truly teach the way of God." That was their preface. And that has a lovely thing to say to us. They actually were saying exactly what Jesus was doing. And he was teaching the way of God. He was speaking and teaching rightly. And he was giving no partiality. They'd seen that. Jesus treated those who they regarded as outside, as outsiders, as sinful, as not worth speaking to, as people to avoid. He treated them just the same as he treated anybody else. Jesus did not, he was impartial. He did not favour those who could support him financially, those who could help him, those who were important in the land. He showed no favour to those who were wealthy. He treated them all the same, the poor and the wealthy. He was impartial, and that is a wonderful thing to take on board. You and I are of the same worth to Jesus as any other person in this world, as Boris Johnson, Theresa May, Michel Barnier, whatever you think of these great names that hit our, we are of the same value to him as Adele, or as Madonna, or as any of the great film stars. We are of the same value to him. We sometimes watch programs and people are awestruck by these big names they meet, and they're like worshipping them. Jesus showed no partiality to anybody. And so we shouldn't either. We should have the same regard for everyone. So that they said all of these things, they were all true. And then they said to Jesus, is it lawful for us to give tribute to Caesar or not? Is it right to pay the taxes to Caesar? Is it right to pay an invading ruler the money that he demands of us in taxes? Is it right? And they were hoping he'd say, well, if he said yes, it's right, that the people would lynch him because they hated the Romans so much. Or if he said, no, we shouldn't be paying it, that the Romans would arrest him. They were hoping that Jesus would be tripped by this question. And Jesus perceived their craftiness and said to them, show me a coin. So if you've ever been to the British Museum, it's a lovely place to go. Or look it up online. A coin, a denarius from the 1st century AD. Look it up. And even back then, the coins that they made had an image of Caesar on one side of it. Right, even back then, 2,000 years ago, they had an image of Caesar. It wasn't beautifully minted like our modern coins are, but you have a look. Have a look at the coins. Look it up on the internet. The coins, the denarius and the talent that were around in those days in Israel. They had Caesar's head on one side. And he said to them, whose likeness and inscription is this? You know, because it said the Caesar's name on it. Whose picture is here? And they said, Caesar's. And he said, render to Caesar that which is Caesar's, and to God that which is God's. He said, and this is something we should live by. They weren't able, they marvelled at his answer because it was so clever and it was so wise. It was so wise. It completely answered the question. And this is the question that we maybe face when you think about the rules, the new rules and regulations keep changing every week or so about what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. And maybe there's bits of you that says, well, I'm not doing that. I think that's unnecessary. Render to Caesar that which is Caesar's, and to God that which is God's. If things that the government demand of us do not interfere with our commitment to God, we should be obedient subjects. We should comply because they have charge over our physical bodies. But we should render to God that which is God's. And if the only time we should be rebellious against what a government orders us to do is if that order conflicts with our allegiance to Jesus and to God. So there's a thought for today as we think about that. Jesus had things to contend with that people didn't like doing, that were demanded of them by the Roman rulers, just like we have things that are demanded of us by our government. Think about the relationship between our allegiance to God and our allegiance to our government, our commitment, our submission to the things that govern our daily life. And maybe keep the speed limit. Keep the speed limit. I heard one preacher say, you know, when you exceed the speed limit, you leave your guardian angel behind because he sticks to the rules. It's a thought. Have a great day today, and I'll see you tomorrow.